Welcome to the adult class. We are in Revelation chapter 2. We are down around verse 12. We began to somewhat give an introduction last week to Pergamos. I won't go into those things again, but we do want to go ahead and start to read about Pergamos. We'll start at verse 12. We'll read down through, verse what? 17, and then we'll go back and discuss it. Revelation chapter 2, verse 12. And to the angel of the church in Pergamos write, These things saith he which hath the sharp two-edged sword. I know thy works, and where thou dwellest, even where Satan's seat is. And thou holdest fast my name, and hast not denied my faith, even as those days when Antipas was my faithful martyr, who was slain among you, where Satan dwelled. I have a few things against thee, because thou hast them there that hold the doctrine of Balaam, who taught Balak to cast a stumbling block before the children of Israel, to eat things sacrificed unto idols, and to commit fornication. So hast thou also them that hold the doctrine of the Nicolaitans, which thing I hate. Repent, or else I will come to thee quickly, and will fight against them with the sword of my mouth. He that hath an ear, let him hear what the Spirit saith unto the churches. To him that overcometh will I give to eat of the hidden manna, and will give him a white stone, and in the stone a new name written, which no man knoweth, save he that receiveth it. All right, let's go back. As I said, we gave somewhat of an introduction to Pergamos last week. I won't go back over that. And we didn't get to this point. The last part of verse 12, these things which saith he which hath the sharp sword with two edges. What do you think the significance of that is? A sharp sword with two edges. And he's describing again that of Christ. These things saith he, Jesus, which hath the sharp sword with two edges. What do you think the significance of a sword with two edges?
I know it coming and going, both directions. Application, I guess, Romans, it's twice as powerful.
No, I hadn't thought about it in that sense, twice as powerful. Remember in the Hebrew letter, chapter 4, verse 12, the Word of God is quick, sharper than a two-edged sword. The sword represented authority in the sense that it could wield defensively as well as offensively. And as Bobby says, it does cut both ways. You think about it, think of the Jews for a moment. In Matthew chapter 3 as well as Mark chapter 3, when John the Baptist began to teach, and many flocked unto him to hear the message, and the Pharisees, they didn't want anything to do with that. And if you remember, John said, say not that Abraham's my father. And John said, in essence, and Jesus did as well, if Abraham were your father, you do the works of your father Abraham. But John would say that God could have, raised up seed of Abraham. And I'm not butchering that. Go back and read Matthew chapter 3, you'll see what I'm talking about there. Here's the point. This sharp two-edged sword, I can't say, well, I belong to the Centerview Church of Christ. That's all I need. If I am wrong, if I am in error, does this sword cut me to? Yeah. And to me, I think, in other words, it's not consistent, but it's whether whoever is right, whoever is wrong, it cuts both ways. Okay? In other words, it's not a favoritism thing. It's not political. You've seen so much, even in the judicial system. Well, you know so-and-so, and this one, that one, and maybe if you're on trial for something, you get people who will vouch for you. Hey, I'm a good guy, or whatever, and you need to take it easy on me because of what. Well, this sword that's sharp on both edges, it's consistent. It's not political. it's not anything, but it is truth. And truth is simply what it is. Michael, it was. Well, Mason replaced the battery.
There you go.
Yeah, but it's blinking, so I guess it's the batteries. So no, Mike, you're dead. The batteries must not have been good he put in. Any thoughts about that before we go further? We drop down into verse 13.
I never thought of that way. Objective justice.
Objective would have been a better word for me to use.
Yeah, that makes all the sense. Yeah, I appreciate that. Never thought of that way.
That one word helps to describe it. Verse 13, here's his description of the church. I know thy works. We've stated many times in all of these, that's the way they all began. Nothing can be hidden from the Almighty, the All-Knowing. I know thy works, and where thou dwellest, even where Satan's seat is. What does it mean, where Satan's seat is? Apparently, there were a lot of evil people there in the city of Pergamos. Many people believe because a lot of Jews were there. The Roman had their emperor worship. It was very strong there at Pergamos. And it was a city with a great deal of influence from Rome. And I believe that's what he has reference to. And where thou dwellest, even where Satan's seat is. In other words, the environment, it is very strong for temptation, especially concerning idol worship. Michael's got us fixed up. Thanks, Mike. Yeah, that's better. Hopefully they can hear in the back now. Anyone else have an idea about where Satan's seat is, what he may have meant by that? Pardon? No, again, I'll repeat myself briefly. You may not have heard, but I simply think it was because of the temptations that would have been there. Rome had a strong presence there. Emperor worship was really enforced in this in this city. And I think that's the idea. This congregation is dwelling where Satan's seat is. In other words, where Satan dwelled. Not literally, physically. Satan wasn't sitting there with with horns and his pitchfork. Simply the presence of these people who would have been bringing a great deal of pressure upon the church. So he said, I know thy works where Satan dwellest, even where Satan's seat is, and thou holdest fast my name, and hast not denied my faith, even in those days when Antipas was my faithful martyr, who was slain among you, where Satan dwelleth. And again, he brings up this idea of where Satan dwells. So he commends them here in this part of the text. He said, you've held fast my name. You haven't given up. You haven't quit. Now, later, there's some things going on in the congregation that are not good. But he points out that you've held fast my name. What do you think that means? You've held fast my name.
You know, like, you see, like, the theme of Revelation is be steadfast. I've got everything under control. And it's like, he sees their condition, he knows what they're going through. And it's like he says, don't worry about Satan. I know where he is. I know where he's focused. And everything's under control. Y'all just remain steadfast. You see that in your heart.
Sure. Okay. Because thou hast them, go back to verse 13. You've held fast my name, meaning you've been faithful. He said you've not denied my faith. And even though they were going through a great deal of pressure, and I know you keep hearing me say this, but it's true in every congregation at this time, you're hearing that same thing being brought up. He said, you've held fast my name, hast not denied my faith, even in the days when Antipas was my faithful martyr. What's a martyr?
A person that gives up their life for something.
A person who gives up their life for something, a reason, a cause. He dies for the cause. And apparently, and to my knowledge, we don't know anything about this man. The scriptures, to my knowledge, doesn't say anything about Antipas. But certainly Jesus does here. He says he died for the cause. He died for his faith. He said he was slain among you, which would suggest right there in that city
there amongst the people. He was put to death. He had made a stand for something. When I say something, I don't know if he was forced to renounce Christianity or forced to give allegiance to the God of Rome or what, but he refused and he was put to death. I don't know why, but it does say that, here was a man in the congregation who had given up his life. He stood firm. He was faithful. A faithful witness, yes. All right. Good. He said he was slain who was slain among you, again, where Satan dwelleth. So as I said, apparently there was a strong presence of the Roman influence here of emperor worship. Okay, verse 14. In verse 14 and 13 and 14, I think we can learn a great deal from. He says, but I have a few things against thee, because thou hast there them, and notice that now, that hold the doctrine of Balaam. Now let me stop. What did he say back in verse 13? He said, I know where you dwell. He said, and you've held fast my name and has not denied my faith. So he said that there were many there who had been faithful, who hadn't fallen, who held, their faith. And then he says in the next verse, I've got some things against you. Why? Because thou hast them there that hold the doctrine of Balaam. And my point is this. A congregation may not be perfect. According to Jesus, some in the congregation here held the doctrine of Balaam. Now, we'll talk about that in a moment. Did everyone in the congregation hold the doctrine of Balaam? No, they didn't. They didn't. They were faithful. They were true. They were righteous. Some in the congregation were in error. Some were holding this doctrine of Balaam. And Jesus doesn't say, well, you have some over here who are faithful. These over here are not faithful. It's the whole congregation's going to hell. That's not what he said. So, there may be things. Jim Andrews doesn't control me. Okay? Jim Andrews can be faithful. I may be unfaithful. I may hold some doctrine or some teaching or do something which is wrong. Is he going to be condemned because of me? No. Now I realize that I need to do what I can to influence the church properly and so on. But I just, that caught my attention when I read this. Here in verse 13, he said, you've held fast my name, you haven't denied the faith. And then in verse 14, he didn't say all of them. He said there's some there, verse 14. Thou hast them there that hold the doctrine of Balaam. So, we shouldn't become discouraged if, I think it's easy for us as a body of people. And we're all so different. We have different economics, we have different backgrounds, we have different abilities, we have different educational achievements, we are different financially. Again, we are a group of people who are totally from one end of the spectrum to the other. Well, there's going to be differences. And, it's easy for someone to look, the pew in front of them, beside them, behind them, or whatever, and say, I think, so-and-so, I don't know about their life. Well, that may be true. May not know about their life. Can we say that there's no one in our congregation that may be living in sin? Who would make such a statement? But just because someone may be in sin or even living in sin, does that condemn me? No. I think we need to remember that, and I get that from this text. Ted?
But if you're in a congregation and there are people holding the doctrine of Balaam, and you know that they're holding the doctrine of Balaam, then in love, we go to that person and you say, hey, what's going on? Do you believe this? Let's study this. This is not right. I'm concerned for you. I love you. Balaam is not what you're supposed to be worshiping. Am I right?
Absolutely. I'm just turning to another scripture. Galatians chapter 6, verse 1. Brethren, if a man be overtaken in a fault, ye which are spiritual, restore such a one in the spirit of meekness, considering thyself, lest thou also be tempted. So certainly Ted is right, and that's not the only passage we could use. But then again, I think we need to be careful. Here's what I mean. You know, I preached a sermon on assumptions, and neither one of them are here, but and it was all just to make the point about Dwight and Alita having a fight because they drove different vehicles and they didn't even park next to each other, yada, yada, yada. I had a man in the congregation say, he told me about, he's a couple. He said, she's having an affair. I said, how do you know this? And he goes on, he said, have you noticed she hadn't been wearing her wedding ring? I told him I hadn't noticed. But now, ladies, we have several ladies in our audience. Speak up, please. Is there any reason you'd ever take off your wedding band?
Yes.
No. Yes, thank you. Tell me why.
Mine doesn't fit anymore.
All right.
Just be honest.
right now, because it don't fit.
See, I mean, there's a lot of reasons. Ladies who are, I've known, having a child or whatever, and, you know, they begin to retain some fluid or whatever. I think that's what I'm doing, because my ring is, I think I'm just retaining fluid here. But there's lots of reasons. Wow, and to see that and to say, oh, you know, she's having an affair on him, and they may break up, and then he was telling me about some other things, and I said to him, you got any evidence or proof of this? And I was an elder at the time, and he's, you know, haven't you opened your eyes up? And again, when I began to question, it was like, you know, the wedding ring and this, and another guy, a man, was having an affair, and I said, how do you know? What kind of evidence? He said, you can tell. I said, you can. Yeah, you can just tell, he said. Now, in those situations, Ted said if a man or a brother be overtaken in a fault, you would go help that person in the spirit of meekness. But now, what if other things are there? We can't always go with the appearance of evil, can we? No, we can't. You know, I may look at, well, now this man, he's a little too comfortable with this other man's wife, and they're talking way too much. Or, I mean, again, I can do all kinds of stuff. In my mind, I see this, you know, all this is just, you know, fitting together in my mind, but there's no evidence. Well, I can cause problems when I go do that. But as Ted said, if we knew someone was in the congregation, was involved in, this is Balaam, the doctrine of Balaam, and you'd think today, well, there's never anyone could be guilty of that. Well, there can be, and I'll explain that in a moment. But, yeah, where there's evidence, and we know that, Ted's exactly right. We ought to love our brother or sister enough to go try to help them out of the sin. Ted?
There's also the point, if I'm looking at you, and I'm making assumptions about you, maybe I'm the one that has the problem. Maybe, first of all, I need to mind my own business. Second of all, if I think there's a problem, I should investigate in meekness, in love, and I should have a good motivation, not just because I want to tell somebody else what I think is going on.
That last word you used is the most important, the right motive. You know, if we have, those of us who have children, and if we suspect maybe our child is, I don't know, developing a drug problem, a drinking problem, or something else, should a parent, even though that child's left home, we see them going, you know, they're getting ready to drop off the edge of the cliff here, and we know what's going to happen, the disastrous results of such, you know, what parent wouldn't say, hey, can we talk? You know, let's talk. Why would you do that? Because you love them. And you want to help them avoid the pitfalls of where they are headed. Now, sometimes they don't want to talk. Okay? Well, I found that out sometimes. But, again, the whole idea, and Ted is right, and Ted, I appreciate you bringing that up. You know, we ought to try to help someone, but let's make sure our motives are pure, we have some evidence, we know what's going on, this kind of thing, before we do such. Okay, let me get back here where I need to be. So in verse 13, he says, again, I know where you dwell. It's where Satan has a strong presence. The temptations are strong. But verse 14, I have a few things against thee, because thou hast them there, not all the congregation, but some there, who held the doctrine of Balaam. Now, he goes on to describe a little bit about Balaam. He said, who taught Balak to cast a stumbling block before the children of Israel, to eat things sacrificed unto idols, and to commit fornication. I think the easiest thing for us to do would be go back and read just a little bit about Balaam here. Balaam was a prophet of God. Balak was a king of Edom. I believe it was Edom, if my memory serves me correct. I can't remember from my last study here. And basically what happened was, here's this king of Edom, Balak. He sees how the Israelites have already been victorious in battle with many places. So he wants to hire Balaam, the prophet of the people of Israel. He wants to hire him to curse the Israelites. In his mind, Balaam had the ability, if he would simply curse the Israelites, then they won't be strong against us. They'll be defeated easily. Well, and Balaam even went to God, God, can I do this? And God, no. Why would you want to curse my people? They haven't done anything, to deserve being. And when I say cursed, I'm not talking about throwing out some 4-letter words at them, but to pronounce a curse upon them is the idea. He said, no. But yet Balaam has this idea, and Balak, the king, continues to come back and to, I'll give you more and this type of thing. And then Balaam comes up with the idea of playing both sides of the fence. He wanted that money. He wanted those rewards. And in essence, here's what he came up with. Although I can't curse Israel, I can't pronounce a curse upon them. Balak, the king, let me tell you how to get God to curse them. Convince your women, your young ladies, to come across the fence, so to speak, and marry these boys. Well, that was against God's command. It had nothing to do with skin pigment. It had nothing to do with culture. It had everything to do with religion. And once these young ladies began to present themselves, and of course I'm sure it was the young men too, when they intermingled and intermarried, then these young men, began to worship the gods of Edom. And God was furious with his people. And we'll go on in a minute and look, and I'll show you how many lost their lives because of this. So that is the doctrine of Balaam he talks about. Let me read to you just a little bit of this. Let me find the right passage here. No, that's not what I want. Numbers chapter 25, verse 1 through 3. And Israel abode in Chittim, and the people began to commit whoredom with the daughters of Moab. And they called the people unto the sacrifices of their gods, and the people did eat and bowed down to their gods, and Israel joined himself unto Baal Peor, and the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel. So this all came about through the influence of the prophet. Once more, get this in your mind. Here's this other king saying to this prophet of Israel, curse them. I can't do that. God won't let me. Oh, I really want your rewards. I know a way you can get God to curse them himself. So in essence, he's telling this king what to do to get Israelites, in the disfavor of God. And he did all that because of money, a desire, a greedy desire. Just like Judas, who would sell 30 pieces of silver. And for that, he would betray Jesus. Ted, you had your hand up.
Going back to what you said before, where were the parents? Where were the parents saying, look at this pitfall. You can't marry these people. God said you can't marry these people.
No, you're right. You're right. Numbers 31, verse, let me turn in and read this. Number 31, verse, what do I want to read here? Verse 16. Behold, these caused the children of Israel through the counsel of Balaam to commit trespass against the Lord in the matter of Peor. And there was a plague among the congregation of the Lord. Now therefore kill every male among the little ones, and kill every woman that hath known man by lying with him. And he went on to talk about this. And there was a plague that came upon the people. And do you know how many people died? Anyone know? Back again, because of this occasion. Numbers 25, verse 9. Let me turn and read this. Wish I was faster on this thing. Now, this was a plague because of this event. And those that died in the plague were 20 and 4,000. Have you ever stopped to think about how many 24,000 is? I guess it was, I don't know, it was last week. I looked this up. What do you say the population of the city of Elizabeth? And I'm not talking about Carter County. I'm talking about the city of Elizabeth.
18,000.
13 what? Ted?
18,000.
David, you live in the city, don't you? You have any idea?
I'm gonna guess 20-something, 21, 22.
I had no idea. And actually, you folks aren't all that far off. According to the 2021 census, the population of Elizabeth is about 14,000, a little over 14,000. You know what the population of Carter County is? Now again, Carter County, we are so spread out. You've got Tom, he's up Stony Creek and all those little hollows and houses at every end. And it's not just Stony Creek. You've got Happy Valley. You've got Valley Forge and Siam. You've got, Milligan, Rome Mountain. What's the school over there where Edith Guy lives? What do they call that area? Gap Creek. I'm simply mean, it's a big area with a lot of homes. According to the census, 56,134 people live in Carter County. Now, I say all that to say this. When God destroyed 24,000 people who had violated his laws because they had intermingled through the counsel of a prophet of all people. You know, the prophet told him again, I know I'm repeating myself, I want this to sink in, because he wanted money. You know, I can't curse him, but I'll tell you how to get God to curse him. And at 24 people, every person in the city of Elizabeth would die. 10,000 in the county. Almost, not quite, almost half the people in the entire county. Now, again, I only bring that up to show you that's an immense amount of people. So, you know, this wasn't something innocent. What Balaam did just to receive money and possessions and goods and so on was tragic. Now, make the application here. When it says back in the book of Revelation, they have the doctrine of Balaam. Well, what do you mean they had the doctrine of Balaam? That was something that happened, you know, hundreds and hundreds of years earlier. But yet many of the other people, Peter even talks about this prophet. Jude talks about Balaam. Several individuals in the New Testament also bring up the name Balaam. So how can we do that? Greed and money and things like this. Using the positions within the church to pad our own pockets. I was at Central Church, the congregation in Johnson City, and they have some summer series. They don't have, to my knowledge, gospel meetings, but they had like, I don't know if you call it lectureship or whatever, but I've been invited a couple of times, and sometimes when Tim Hall, and he means nothing by this, but he would get up and he'd, you know, David Irick, he's Johnson City locksmith, and of course that's in Johnson City, and he'd go on to say, if you need a locksmith, here's the man you need. That bothers me. How many times have you ever heard me in a class or behind the pulpit say, hey, I own this and I can help you and I can do this and I can make keys for a car or I can open up your safe or I can whatever. You've never heard that. Well, I just think it would be wrong to use a position of standing for trying to pad my pocket for money. But apparently men were in the congregation, those who were doing the works of Balaam, and the doctrine of Balaam always had to do with money, with greed, trying to take advantage of other people. And we could see how that could happen within the congregation. What did Jesus accuse the Pharisees of doing? If you remember in Matthew chapter 23, he was talking about how they'd taken advantage of widows and others who, may not have, were easy pickings, I guess you would say. They took advantage of them financially. And God has always held a very strong view of that, in opposition to it.
I'm sorry.
No, please go ahead.
Do you think that this had anything to do, I agree totally with what you're saying, but also anything to do with Judaizing teachers trying to, get people to go back to Judaism? In other words, worshiping the old law, instead of the law that should be worshiped, Christianity, and turning away from Jesus, or Christianity, back to Judaism. You think any of that has been involved with it?
I don't know. The only thing I know about Balaam is the example we have back in the Old Testament, where Balaam loved the rewards of hire, rewards of gifts and money, and he would do anything, even go underhandedly to betray people for money. Centerview is not that large of a congregation. I have heard of people who were running for some county office, and they wanted to go to the biggest congregation in the area. Why?
Votes.
Yeah, votes, whoever said that, right. It had nothing to do. I want to benefit the congregation. I want to help the congregation. But there was ulterior motives, if you will. And I guess there's lots of ways that you could apply this, but that seemed to be, when it talks about Balaam, holds those to the doctrine of Balaam. If it was something else, I don't know what it is. I just know what Balaam did. And as I said, Peter also talks about Balaam. Let me just read to you a couple of these things here real quick. 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 15. Peter says, which have forsaken the right way and are gone astray, following the way of Balaam, the son of Bosor, who loved the wages of unrighteousness. Jude, in his brief epistle, said, woe unto them, for they have gone the way of Cain, and ran greedily after the error of Balaam for reward, and perished in the gainsaying of Kor. So, different writers in the New Testament also use Balaam as an example here of greedy, just taking advantage of the situation or of others to pad their own pocket, so to speak, to make money. It's all about greed. I don't know what else to say about that. Any other comments you might have?
I think that's just like you're a locksmith, and when you go out open state, people trust you. But see, you've got opportunity, you could rob those people pretty easy. So that's one thing you gotta think about when you're around people and trying to do things right.
Well, yeah, that's true. Aren't there even laws about, usually it's relationships, from those who are in authority, such as a school teacher? A preacher would fit into that. Using his position to take advantage of a minor in an immoral way, there's certain laws that would specifically deal with that kind of thing. Michael?
Like you was talking about using the pulpit for advertising, and I understand what you're saying, but kind of like what Butch is saying, my mechanic is a member of the church. And if he weren't, and he says, hey, your car needs this, this, and this, I don't necessarily trust that, but I don't even question him because I know the kind of person he is. He's a good Christian man. And I know he's not going to cheat me, he's not going to take advantage of me. So on the flip side of that, if I know a Christian businessman, that's where I'm going.
And that's valid. That's a good point.
Not to pat his pocket necessarily. And that too, he's got to eat too. But there's some security, you're not going to take advantage of.
Yeah.
Necessarily. I guess it's possible, but.
I understand. And that makes sense. But I am not going to push myself.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Any other comments?
But just going on what Michael's saying, if someone in my family is an attorney, I need an attorney, that's who I'm going to go to. Someone in my family has a store, I'm going to patronize them. We are also a family.
Yeah.
And we should support one another in every way.
I agree. Someone else want to say something?
No, basically what it is. The Bible says, do good to all men, especially the household of faith. Our attitude is primarily should be towards our family, and that is the household of God. And it's truly understood your position. I would feel the same way, I'm gonna get up and use what I've got for the game, and talk about it, use my position to get money from people, whether it be the Lord's church or somebody outside.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so, understand what you're talking about.
All right. So how these people, they said they hold the doctrine, teaching, I assume the idea of how Balaam acted, who taught Balak to cast a stumbling block before the children of Israel, and they were doing this to eat things sacrificing to idols, to commit fornication, and some within the congregation were doing that. Everyone in the congregation were doing this? No. No. But some were, and they were rebuked because of it.
David, where is it commanded not to eat meat sacrificed to idols?
Where is it commanded?
Yeah, you know, meat fried is meat fried. I mean, you know, the motive behind why it was fried, you know, Christians don't even need to worry about that. I don't know, did the worship from did they eat the meat too?
Apparently, here's my understanding of this, Tom, and when these people intermarried with Edom, the Edomites, they began to take worship to their gods. They sacrificed things to this god, and symbolically, they would eat of this meat that had been sacrificed to this idol and therefore condemned. I would say, you asked about, you said, where's the command? Again, this is my thoughts without going back and studying it. Whenever God, the 10 Commandments, thou shalt have no other God before me. I think that was when they partake of this knowingly and purposely, eating this meat had been sacrificed to whether, I don't remember what the god of Edom was, Baal maybe, I don't know. But if they were to offer this sacrifice in the name of Baal, we're honoring Baal here. And then for me to eat of this meat knowingly, then therefore I become a part of this this worship of Baal.
So that was part of the worship of Baal.
Yes. You know, it was part of their worship. And as well as fornication. If you'll notice, he mentions here in the text, and to eat things sacrificed unto idols, and to commit fornication. It was not only, usually when they had this idol worship, they would throw in things, there would be idol prostitutes, and, you know, you talk about the party. Well, this was a big party here with people with no clothes on for much of it. And it was a very sensuous thing, and that's the reason that God hated it so, and sent a plague and killed 24,000. Anything else, Tom?
The scripture you read earlier, Numbers 25, 1 and 2, talks about the harlotry and the bowing down and eating also.
All right. Good, Mary. Thank you. Ted?
And they were doing that religiously
Yes.
under Judaism. Now, Paul later said that doesn't matter unless it offends a weaker Christian. You know, that we should know the difference. But that was a whole different law and a different understanding during the time that he's talking about.
In 1 Corinthians, I think it's chapter 8. I just read that this week. I had to get my oil changed, my van. So I'm sitting out in the lobby, and they always have a Gideon Bible. So I just picked it up and was reading Corinthians. But I think it was chapter 8, if I'm not mistaken. And Paul, in essence, says, an idol is nothing. We know that. And, you know, eat meat, don't ask questions. Meat, there's nothing wrong with meat. But if someone with conscience sake said, in essence, hey, this meat's been offered an idol, and you're going to take this, Paul says no, because it would offend the weaker, you know, person's conscience. But that's correct. All right, we covered a lot of ground there. The classes are coming up. I'll try to mark this here so I can pick it up. We'll talk about verse 15, the Nicolaitans, which I know nothing about. To my knowledge, no one does. But we'll start there, Lord willing, next week. Thank you for your participation.